Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're diving straight into the big stories making waves today, the ones you really need to know about coming out of India and how it's all connecting with the rest of the world. Think of it like, well, your personal news briefing without having to scroll endlessly. We've got a packed agenda, a really unexpected sports win, some, well, let's say interesting developments in global trade, and a lot in between. Let's get started.
Yeah, sounds like we got quite a mix today. Everything from the nail-biting finish of a big cricket match to, well, the always complex world of international trade and some serious issues within our justice system. It's a good snapshot of what's shaping India right now.
For sure. Let's kick things off with some sports news, and I bet this is a result that's got fans talking. After a whole decade, the Royal Challengers Bengaluru, finally, they've broken their losing streak against the Mumbai Indians. And at Wankhede Stadium, no less. Talk about a thriller of a match. You could practically feel the tension in the air.
You're not kidding. Bengaluru's batting was just incredible to watch. They ended up at a very impressive 221 for 5 and leading that charge. Virat Kohli, of course. He just smashed his fastest T20 half-century in, what, 7 years? With a crazy 67 runs off just 42 balls. And get this, that inning also made him only the 5th batsman in the entire world to ever reach 13,000 runs in T20 cricket. That's just incredible.
Absolutely huge. And he wasn't the only one out there doing the heavy lifting. Rajapatidar had a crucial innings too, hitting a super fast 64 off only 32 balls. And then Jitesh Sharma came in to give them a strong finish with an unbeaten 40. I mean, for a while there, it looked like Bengaluru had it in the bag. But then Mumbai started making this crazy comeback.
Yeah, it was getting pretty intense. Tilak Varma and Hardik Pandya teamed up and just blew everyone away, scoring 89 runs in a blank, just 34 balls. The pressure was right back on Bengaluru, and for a moment, it really did seem like Mumbai was about to snatch that victory at the very last second. But then everything shifted again when they both got dismissed pretty quickly. Varma was out after scoring a solid 56, and then Pandya followed, also with a good contribution of 42. Those were the turning points for sure.
Absolutely. And then in this totally dramatic final over, it was Krunal Pandya, and just to be clear, not related to Hardik, who secured that win for Bengaluru. He took out 3 crucial wickets. Mumbai ended up at 209 for 9. So close, just 9 runs short. You can just imagine how ecstatic Bengaluru was and how completely crushed Mumbai felt.
Yeah, what really stood out to me was that Bengaluru's captain, Rajat Patidar, he specifically called out the amazing death bowling of Bhuvneshwar Kumar, Josh Hazelwood, and Krunal Pandya. For those who don't follow cricket religiously, death bowling basically means those really crucial final overs where the bowlers, they're trying to keep the other team from scoring and, of course, take wickets. It seems like Bengaluru's plan for those last tense moments really worked out for them.
It's a big win for Bengaluru, no doubt, especially when you think about how they also just recently won their first match against Chennai Super Kings over in Chennai. And after 17 years of, well, not winning there, that's a pretty major turnaround for them. But for Mumbai, things aren't looking so great. This is their 4th loss in just 5 games. Hardik Pandya, their captain, he said they fell short by 2 hits. You can tell they're not happy about it. So for anyone following the IPL, this just shows you it's unpredictable, right? The difference between winning and losing can come down to the smallest thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also shows you just how important it is to take those key opportunities when they come up. And of course, you see the impact of individual players, even within a team context. But let's move on from the thrills of the cricket field for a bit, shall we? Let's talk about something that's maybe a bit less glamorous, but just as important, international trade. We've got some important updates about how those tariffs the former U.S. president put in place are affecting things.
Right. Those tariffs, a 26% duty that's specific to India, plus that 10% baseline duty, it sounds like it's creating some real problems for Indian exporters, especially those dealing with electronics, gems, and jewelry. That's got to be a big hurdle for those industries. What does this mean for people who are keeping an eye on the Indian economy?
Well, there's no doubt that those tariffs are making things tougher in the short term. But here's something interesting. Experts are actually saying that they don't expect these tariffs to have a huge long-term impact on India's overall exports. Why is that? Well, for one thing, India's share of global exports is relatively moderate. And on top of that, you've got government policies like the Production-Linked Incentive Scheme, or PLI. That basically means the government's giving financial incentives to boost manufacturing within India, specifically in those key sectors.
That's a more optimistic outlook than I would have guessed. So even though things are tight right now, maybe the long-term picture isn't as bleak as some might think.
Exactly. And there's another angle to this that might actually be good for India. The U.S., they've also put higher tariffs on some of India's biggest competitors, countries like China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. This could actually end up giving Indian exporters a competitive edge in the U.S. market.
That's a fascinating twist. So these tariffs, something that seemed like a threat at first, might actually open up new opportunities for Indian businesses that are trying to expand into the U.S. Who would have thought?
Yep. And it's really important to remember that India was the very first country to start negotiating trade deals with the U.S. after those tariffs went into effect. That shows you how proactive India is being about navigating all this and maybe even coming out ahead. The Federation of Indian Export Organizations, FIEO, they're even predicting that Indian exporters could grab a massive $50 billion worth of market opportunities over the next few years, maybe 2 to 3 years. That's a huge potential boost to the Indian economy.
That's a massive number. So which specific sectors are people saying will benefit the most from all these potential new opportunities?
Well, textiles are looking good, electronics too, and also semiconductors. These are the sectors that people are saying have the best chance for going global. And a lot of industry leaders are emphasizing that, look, Indian businesses need to diversify their markets. That's key. And they also need to focus on innovation and high-quality products. That's how they'll not only survive all this trade stuff, but really thrive in the long run. The big takeaway here is that India's manufacturing sector is tough. It's showing that it can bounce back, and it's got huge potential to grow even with all these global tariff issues.
Now, for something completely different, let's talk about a sector that's making a lot of noise these days: sneakers. India is becoming a major player in the sneaker world, both in terms of manufacturing and innovation. What's driving this change, and what does it mean for, well, the average person?
Right? It's a real shift happening. There are a few things coming together to make this happen. For starters, those big international companies, they're finally waking up to the fact that the Indian sneaker market is huge and mostly untapped. And at the same time, you've got Indian companies popping up with all sorts of cool new ideas and designs. One really big thing to watch is this investment from Taiwan's Hongfu Industrial Group. They're like the second biggest sneaker maker in the world, and they're putting money into this massive new factory in Tamil Nadu. They're planning to make a whopping 25 million shoes every year within 5 years. That's a lot of sneakers.
That is a lot of shoes. And you mentioned something about this aligning with what the government's doing. What's the connection there?
Yeah, it's a pretty perfect fit. This investment helps the Indian government in a big way because they're really pushing to raise the quality standards for things made in India. Their goal is to boost exports, and better quality products are a big part of that. And the Bureau of Indian Standards, they've recently put in stricter rules to make sure that happens, especially for shoes. So for you, the average consumer, this could mean that you'll see more high-quality sneakers that are made right here in India.
It's interesting to think about the state of the market right now. You've got these global brands that everyone knows, but there's also this huge unorganized sector that's still a major player.
Right, that's an important point if you want to understand the whole picture. You've got those big global brands that pretty much run the formal footwear market. But then you've got this other side of the market, the unorganized sector, with all these small local shoemakers. Believe it or not, they're still responsible for almost 2/3 of all the shoes sold in India. They mainly cater to people who are looking for cheaper options. And sometimes, yeah, you might come across some counterfeit stuff in that part of the market. So there's a big gap in terms of price and quality depending on where you shop.
So basically, if you're looking to buy sneakers, there are a ton of choices, but you have to be aware that the quality and authenticity can vary a lot.
Exactly. But here's the exciting part. You're starting to see these new, innovative Indian brands popping up. Companies like Comet, they're making sneakers that are specifically designed for the Indian climate. And then there's Zen Barefoot. They're all about those minimalist barefoot shoes. They're really pushing the boundaries and coming up with cool, functional designs. Comet's approach is particularly interesting because they're doing everything themselves from start to finish. They control their whole production process. And that gives them a lot of freedom to experiment and create sneakers that are really customized for what Indian consumers want.
So the future of India's sneaker industry sounds pretty bright.
The experts seem to think so. They're saying that India is going to see a huge increase in high-quality, high-value sneaker manufacturing over the next 3 to 5 years. They're even predicting that India is going to become one of the major sneaker production hubs globally. But for this growth to really last and benefit everyone, it's going to be essential to find ways to bring those existing small-scale shoemakers along for the ride.
Let's move on now to something much more serious. We've got a report about a Supreme Court decision, an acquittal in a rape and murder case. It's a pretty disturbing story.
Yeah, this is a really big ruling, and it's got some troubling implications for the way our justice system works. The Supreme Court has acquitted a man who spent, get this, a decade on death row. He was convicted in a rape and murder case back in 2016 in Uttarakhand. The reasons they gave for this acquittal are really unsettling. They said there was fabricated evidence and that the whole trial was deeply flawed.
10 years on death row for something that might have been based on made-up evidence. That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
What exactly did the Supreme Court say was wrong with the case?
Well, they found some really serious problems with how the police handled the investigation. They're saying that the police might have actually planted evidence and that they messed up the way they dealt with key forensic samples. Like, some important forensic evidence wasn't sealed properly or examined thoroughly enough. That basically throws the whole reliability of that evidence into question. And on top of that, when you look at the statements from key witnesses, initially they didn't even accuse this man, but then their statements changed later on, and it really looks like someone might have pressured them, maybe even the police. It all raises serious doubts about whether this investigation was done properly.
And the problems weren't just with the investigation, right? What about the actual trial itself?
Yeah, the Supreme Court also had some harsh words for the way the trial was conducted. They said there were signs of bias and that the accused didn't have good legal representation. And to make matters worse, the court apparently used evidence that shouldn't have been allowed, specifically a police officer saying that the accused had confessed. The Supreme Court's conclusion, and this is the really worrying part, is that the whole trial was unfair. They're saying this man was wrongly convicted.
This case really exposes some potentially huge weaknesses in the way our justice system works.
It definitely does. This Supreme Court decision, it didn't just clear this one man's name. It also serves as this big flashing warning sign. It shows that our justice system can fail, and that sometimes innocent people can get caught up in it. It points to problems like misconduct during investigations and not enough oversight by the courts. This case makes it clear that we need some serious reforms to make sure that everyone gets a fair trial and that these kinds of terrible injustices don't happen again.
Now, let's talk about a case with international implications. It's the case of Nikhil Gupta and the alleged plan to kill Sikh separatist leader Gurpratwant Singh Panun, all happening in the U.S.
Right. This is a case that's gotten a lot of attention worldwide, mostly because of the geopolitical issues involved. So, Nikhil Gupta, the man accused in this plot, his trial is set to start in New York on November 3rd, 2025. And here's a curious detail. They've only scheduled the trial to last for 1 week.
1 week. For such a serious accusation, what exactly are they accusing Mr. Gupta of?
The main accusations are that back in 2023, Mr. Gupta supposedly worked with someone named Vikash Yadav, who's said to be an Indian government official, to hire a hitman, the goal, to assassinate Mr. Panun. And they're saying the price tag for this was $100,000. But as you might have guessed, the hitman turned out to be an undercover federal agent. That's how the whole plan fell apart.
And what's Mr. Gupta's side of the story?
He's maintained his innocence from the beginning. He's pleaded not guilty to all the charges. He was extradited to the U.S. from the Czech Republic last year, in 2024, and he's been held in custody ever since.
And what's been the official response from the Indian government to all of this?
Well, when the U.S. told the Indian government about these allegations, back in late 2023, they set up a high-level committee to investigate. This committee, they supposedly found some criminal connections related to this Vikash Yadav guy and recommended that he face legal action. But the details about what Yadav's alleged role in all of this was, they haven't made that public.
This case has some pretty big ramifications internationally.
It absolutely does. The fact that they're talking about a state-sponsored attempt to target someone in another country, that's raised a lot of eyebrows internationally. This is a big deal. It could affect the relationship between India and the United States, and it also brings up issues of international law and justice. That trial, it's going to be watched very closely all over the world.
Now, let's switch gears to the world of tech. There's been a big shift in manufacturing strategy by one of the biggest companies on the planet, Apple. What's the story here?
Apple's moving even more of its iPhone production out of China and over to India. And the main reason, those hefty tariffs that the former U.S. president put on Chinese goods, we're talking 54% on some electronics. That's a lot.
That's a huge tariff. What kind of impact is this having on Apple's bottom line?
Well, it's definitely costing them. Analysts are saying that those tariffs could add something like $300 to the cost of making a single iPhone 16 Pro. And that can mean the price goes way up in the US, maybe even to $2,300.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The tariff on those same kinds of goods coming from India, way lower, just 26%. So for Apple, it just makes more financial sense to move production to India.
So this shift is basically Apple trying to get around those tariffs.
Pretty much, yeah. Given how things are between the US and China right now, it makes sense. At the moment, most iPhones, something like 90%, are still made in China. But Apple's working on making more and more in India. This year, they're planning to make around 25 million iPhones there. There's even talk that if they sent every single iPhone made in India to the US, they can meet almost half of the demand there. But this probably isn't a permanent fix. Apparently, Apple's been trying to get the US government to give them a break on those tariffs, like a special exemption. They've gotten it before for other products.
And these tariffs are hitting Apple's stock price too, right?
Definitely. Their stock's down about 20% recently, the worst it's been in 25 years. To try and sweeten the deal with the US government and get that tariff waiver, Apple's publicly promised to invest a huge amount of money in the US over the next 4 years.
Yeah.
$500 billion. They're also making a big deal about how they're hiring more people in the US and expanding their facilities there. They're basically trying to show that they're committed to the US economy.
Let's switch gears again and talk about international travel. Saudi Arabia has put some new restrictions on visas.
Yeah, they've temporarily stopped issuing certain types of visas. That includes Umrah visas, business visas, and family visas. And this applies to people from 14 countries, including India and Pakistan. This is supposed to last until around mid-June.
Why are they doing this? Seems like a pretty big move.
The main reason is that they're trying to deal with the overcrowding that happens during Hajj every year. It seems like more and more people are using Umrah or visit visas to stay in the country longer than they're allowed to and then try to do Hajj without registering properly.
We all remember what happened last year during Hajj, right? All that overcrowding. That must be a big part of why they're doing this.
Absolutely. Last year, during the 2024 Hajj, over 1,200 pilgrims died. Most of them because of the intense heat and all the congestion. It was a terrible tragedy. So after that, the Saudi authorities decided to get a lot stricter about visas and who's allowed to participate in Hajj. They're even saying that if you're caught doing Hajj without permission, or if you overstay your visa, you could be banned from Saudi Arabia for 5 years.
So they're basically trying to make Hajj safer and more organized with this visa suspension.
Exactly. And just to be clear, this doesn't affect diplomatic visas or residency permits for people who already live in Saudi Arabia. It also doesn't affect the special visas specifically for Hajj. The Saudi Ministry of Hajj and Umrah has made it clear that this is just about logistics, not some kind of political statement. They just want to make sure Hajj is safe and runs smoothly and that everyone who's participating is properly registered. They've also pointed out that people who do Hajj without registering often don't have access to even basic necessities. That just makes the whole situation even more risky.
Okay, shifting focus now to a concerning trend in India. A sharp increase in dog bite cases.
This is a growing problem that we need to take seriously. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they have this program called the Integrated Disease Surveillance Program. And their data shows that dog bites in India has gone up by almost 70% between 2022 and 2024. That's a huge jump in just a couple of years. And it's not just 1 or 2 states. We're seeing this all over the country. What's even more worrying is that along with the rise in dog bites, we're also seeing more deaths from rabies.
That's a really big increase in a short period of time. What's causing this?
The biggest factor seems to be the growing number of stray dogs, especially in cities and towns. And as these dog bite cases go up, people are understandably getting worried. There are a lot more discussions happening about how to control the stray dog population. It's become a sensitive topic politically, too, because local authorities are in a tough spot. They need to keep people safe, but they also need to consider animal welfare. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It's definitely a tricky balance to strike. What's being done to address this problem?
Well, there are several things happening on different levels. There are vaccination programs going on to protect stray dogs from rabies. There are also initiatives to sterilize stray dogs to keep their numbers down. And then there are public awareness campaigns to teach people how to avoid dangerous encounters with dogs and what to do if they get bitten. But even with all that, the numbers are still going up, and that's a clear sign that we need better policies, nationwide policies, to deal with this effectively. We also need to get a lot better at keeping track of how many stray animals there are and making sure that people who get bitten can get the treatment they need, especially those rabies vaccinations. That's critical.
It sounds like we need a comprehensive plan to tackle this problem.
Absolutely. It's going to take a coordinated effort from everyone involved,
Hmm.
the government, animal welfare organizations, healthcare providers, and even just regular people. We all have a role to play in making our communities safer.
Back to international trade for a moment. There's some news about India's import tariffs on cars and how the European Union's pushing to get those tariffs lowered.
Right. So India has some of the highest import tariffs on cars anywhere in the world. Some of them are over 100%. And right now, India and the EU are in talks about a free trade agreement. The EU is making it clear that they want India to significantly lower these tariffs, especially for cars that meet certain standards, like investment standards or environmental standards. If that happens, it could mean that you'll have more choices when you're buying a car, and maybe those cars will be cheaper too.
What's India saying about all this? Are they willing to lower those tariffs?
Well, Indian officials have hinted that they might be open to gradually lowering those tariffs over time. Some are saying they could go down to around 10%. But there's a catch. The car companies in India, they're lobbying hard to keep those tariffs higher, at least at 30%. They're saying that they need that protection, especially with all the money they're investing in electric vehicles. They're worried about competition from foreign companies. So it's a tricky situation. India wants to be open to trade, but it also wants to protect its own industries.
It's a classic dilemma, right? Trying to find that balance between global trade and looking after your own businesses.
Exactly. A while back, India offered to lower the tariffs on some petrol-powered cars to 30%, but they wanted to start with smaller volumes being taxed at a higher rate, 70%. The EU said that wasn't good enough. And then you've got big Indian car companies like Tata Motors and Mahindra. They're really against cutting tariffs on electric vehicles, at least until 2029. They're saying that India's electric vehicle industry needs more time to grow and become competitive before it can handle more competition from outside.
So if those tariffs do get lowered, who would benefit the most?
The European car companies would be big winners. Think BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen. If those tariffs go down, their cars will become more affordable in India, and they'll be able to sell a lot more. And don't forget about Tesla. They're planning to start exporting their electric cars from Germany to India in 2025. They would benefit big time from lower tariffs. Both India and the EU want to finalize this trade deal by the end of this year, so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. It just shows you how complicated things are when you're trying to balance international trade with supporting your own industries.
Time for a weather update. North India is dealing with an early heat wave.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is the first big heat wave of the season in North India. Temperatures are soaring. Here in Delhi, all three major weather stations, Safdarjung, Bridge, and Ayanagar, they're all showing heat wave conditions. But it's the western part of Rajasthan that's being hit the hardest right now.
Besides Delhi and West Rajasthan, are there other areas being affected by this heat wave?
Yeah, there are some areas in East Rajasthan and also in the Saurashtra and Kutch regions of Gujarat that are seeing heat wave conditions. And it looks like parts of Gujarat, West Madhya Pradesh, and Haryana are also being affected now. What's really worrying is how much hotter it is than usual. In Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Delhi, temperatures are 5 to 8 degrees Celsius above normal for this time of year. That's a lot. And Punjab, Haryana, and Chandigarh are also seeing similar temperature differences.
That's a huge difference. It must be pretty dangerous for people. What are the rest of India? Is it hotter than usual there too?
A lot of other places are hotter than usual, but they haven't technically reached heat wave levels yet. Gujarat, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Uttar Pradesh, Odisha, they're all seeing temperatures 1 to 4 degrees Celsius above normal. And it's also hotter than usual in Karkand, Telangana, and the northern interior parts of Karnataka. But there are some parts of the country that are actually a bit cooler than normal right now. Bihar, the Gangetic West Bengal region, and Tamil Nadu, they're all 1 to 2 degrees Celsius below their usual temperatures for this time of year.
Have authorities issued any warnings or advice for people in those really hot areas?
Yes, they have. The Meteorological Department and the Disaster Management Authorities are telling people to be very careful and take precautions because extreme heat can be really dangerous. They're saying this heat wave is going to stick around until at least April 9th, but they're expecting some relief after that, maybe around April 10th. The forecast is showing that temperatures should start going down in northwest India, including Delhi. But this heat wave, coming so early and being so strong, it's a wake-up call. It shows that we need to take extreme weather events seriously and be ready for them.
Okay, let's talk about a big decision by the Indian government. They've rejected a major investment proposal from a Chinese electric vehicle company.
Right, that's right. BYD, one of the biggest names in electric vehicles, they wanted to invest $1 billion in India. But India said no. It seems like they're still being very careful about Chinese investments, even though things have been warming up a bit diplomatically between the two countries. This decision could have a big impact on India's electric vehicle market.
Why did India reject this investment?
The Commerce Minister, Piyush Goyal, he explained it pretty clearly at the India Global Forum in Mumbai. He said, and I quote, "India has to be cautious about its strategic interests." So it sounds like they're putting their strategic concerns and national security ahead of the potential economic benefits, especially in sensitive areas like car manufacturing and the electric vehicle industry.
This isn't the first time a Chinese car company's had trouble getting a foothold in India, right?
Nope, not at all. Remember Great Wall Motor Co., another big Chinese car company? They actually ended up leaving India entirely because they couldn't get through all the regulatory hurdles and approvals. All of this points to a trend. India is being very cautious about doing business with China, even though they are talking more on the diplomatic front.
So it looks like India is being more selective about where it wants investment to come from.
That's a good way to put it. And it seems like they're really interested in attracting investment from electric vehicle companies that aren't Chinese. Take Tesla, for example. India's been having a lot of discussions with them, trying to get them to invest more in India. It's like they're choosing sides, in a way. Tesla's keen on expanding into India, and the Indian government sees it as a win-win. They think it could help boost their manufacturing capabilities in the electric vehicle sector and get more people driving electric cars. This strategy aligns perfectly with India's Make in India initiative, which is all about making India more self-sufficient in manufacturing and a bigger player in the global technology and manufacturing landscape.
Now let's talk about something that's on a lot of people's minds these days. The financial health of India's middle class. There's been a lot of discussion about this recently.
Right. It all started with a social media post by this chartered accountant in Delhi, Ayush Sanghi. His post went viral, and it's got a lot of people worried about a potential financial crisis among middle-class Indians. What he's saying is that people are relying more and more on credit and less on their savings.
So what exactly is he concerned about?
He's saying that middle-class people are using things like EMIs, credit cards, and those buy now, pay later schemes for just about everything, even everyday essentials. It's not just for things they want, it's for things they need. That's a pretty big shift. It used to be that people would use their savings to cover their basic needs, but now they're relying on credit. And that's a sign that a lot of people might be struggling financially.
Is there any evidence to support this idea that people are using more and more credit?
The Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, they've released data that shows this is actually happening. Credit card NPAs, those are basically loans that people have stopped paying back. They've jumped up by almost 29% in the past year. And the total amount of these unpaid credit card debts, it's reached over 6,700 crore rupees. And here's a really worrying part. This is happening while overall bad loans in other parts of the banking system are actually going down. That suggests that there's a specific problem with credit card debt.
Why are so many people defaulting on their credit card payments?
Experts are saying that it's a combination of things. Some people are just overspending, and it's easy to do that when credit is so readily available. Then there are people who've lost their jobs or had their incomes cut, and suddenly they can't keep up with their payments. And then there's the issue of interest rates. Credit card interest rates are notoriously high. They can be over 40% a year. So if you miss a payment or two, the debt can quickly spiral out of control. The big picture here is that a lot of middle-class people are relying on credit to make ends meet. It's a combination of lifestyle pressures and economic challenges, and it's creating a cycle of debt that's hard to break free from. This is a problem that needs to be addressed, and that means promoting financial literacy and teaching people how to manage their money responsibly.
Let's talk a bit about artificial intelligence, specifically OpenAI and some tweaks they've made to their newest model.
Yeah, OpenAI, the company behind those really impressive GPT models, they made some changes to their latest and greatest model, GPT-4o. They did this after people raised concerns about the model being able to create fake government IDs that look incredibly real. This is something to watch closely, especially as AI gets more powerful.
What exactly were people worried about?
And what happened was people started sharing images on social media that looked like real Indian ID cards, things like Aadhaar cards and PAN cards. But these IDs were actually created using AI, and they were so realistic that security experts and the public started freaking out. They were worried that criminals could use this technology to create fake IDs for identity theft or fraud. It's a legitimate concern.
So OpenAI took steps to try to fix this problem.
But they did. They've made some changes to GPT-4o behind the scenes. Now, if you try to use the model to create something that looks like an ID card, it'll automatically put a big disclaimer on the image. Things like sample, demo, or not for official use. The idea is to make it obvious that these aren't real IDs, so they can't be used for anything shady.
Have these changes worked? Are people still able to create fake IDs using GPT-4o?
Well, there have been some reports that not all the AI-generated documents are being labeled with those disclaimers, so it seems like OpenAI still needs to work on making sure those safeguards are working all the time on every single image the model creates. And just last week, someone showed that the model could still be used to create fake ID cards for famous people, even Prime Minister Modi. But more recent reports say that GPT-4o has started refusing to do that kind of thing now. It seems like OpenAI is still working on making the model safer and harder to misuse. This whole